Dr. Fazal Mahmood Chaudhary, please come on the stage.
The most merciful. Next 20 minutes, I'll be talking about the sonographic clues to fetal abnormalities. There's so many abnormalities in first and second trimester, so we are not going to discuss the details of the abnormality. We're going to talk about the subtle changes and the tip of the iceberg, which could give us a clue and point toward the disaster coming ahead. So the basis for diagnosis of a lot of problems in the later fetal life. When we do the first trimester scan, the main purpose is the viability, gestational age, number of fetuses, and then the chorionicity and other things, the nuclear translucency thickness, and detect the gross fetal abnormalities. Nuclear translucency thickness and other markers of aneuploidies. In the 80s, we had the invasive techniques in our hand, and whenever there was any suspicion based on the patient risk factor and the age, we used to poke a needle in, get the fluid out or the placental pieces out to do the karyotyping. But with the advent of newer techniques, better machines, better evaluation of the fetus, we started looking for those signs, those gadgets which could give us a clue. And we know the risk factor, I won't go into text details. And those markers, along with biochemical findings, we calculate the risk factor, and based on that, then we decide whether to go for interventional techniques or not. Nuclear translucency, as you know well, that in 1866, Dr. Down said that nose is small and skin is large for the body. The skin is lax, and that is the basis of the fetal soft tissue defect, and the skin is lax. That is the basis of the measurement of nuchal translucency. This is the sonographic appearance of a collection of fluid under the skin behind the fetal neck in the first trimester, and it's performed at 11 to 13 weeks. In our setup, most of the time, the patient comes with the wrong dates. So internationally, we say that CRL 4584. If patient comes to me and CRL is a 42, no point in beating about the bush. It's not advisable to, because before that, we don't have any standardized chart. And we know that the fetal system is primitive. So any departure from normality will lead to accumulation of fluid on the back of the neck. After 84, the fetal system is mature enough to deal with any irregularities. So in spite of a serious problem in the fetus, it will handle the fluid and it won't accumulate on the back of the neck. So that's why if patient comes to you after CR84, you have to mention it. You have missed the train. It's not the right time to measure the nuchal translucency. Then we have other markers. Instead of nuchal translucency, we'll go for nuchal fold, which is less than 6 mm. If we try to measure nuchal translucency, it will totally give us a wrong impression and wrong interpretation. That's very important. So how to see, you can see over here, this is on the back of the neck. The picture where you can see the mid-sagittal section, this is the palate, the nasal bone, tip of the nose, and on the back of here you can see the diencephalon and I will discuss about that, what is intracranial translucency, the next point. Here we can see this is the nuchal translucency on the back of the neck. So that is, we see all these structures. And here we see on the back of the neck this nuchal translucency. Here you can see even on visual impression, you can say that this nuchal translucency is not normal, it's markedly increased, but we have to quantify it. You have to measure it. To calculate the risk, you have to measure it and decide whether we have to go for invasive techniques. So when we see this nuchal translucency, we have to correlate with the biochemical findings and calculate the risk, and we can do that biochemical marker, NIPT, which is luckily now available here also, and basis on that we can decide about the fetus. So if how to calculate the risk and how to decide it's normal or abnormal. So if nuchal translucency is more than 95th percentile, because at 11 weeks, that nuchal translucency at 11 weeks will be, the norms will be different than at 14 weeks. That's very, very important. We sometimes say that less than 3. That's again a totally wrong idea. 2.5 at 11 weeks will be absolutely abnormal, while at 14 weeks it might be normal. So you have to correlate with the CRL. And at every stage of the pregnancy, first trimester pregnancy, the value of normal and abnormal nuchal trans is different. You have to put it in the chart to calculate the risk. If it's above 95th percentile, and there's another problem. Some center, they have floated their percentile charts. On perinatology.com, it's different. The percentile chart of Fetal Medicine Foundation. So there's a very subtle, fine changes in that. So to be on safer side, we say that if nuchal translucency is more than 95th percentile of that chart, which is the highest one. So we can have false positive, but that false positive will be in favor of the patient. So that's important. If it's more than 3.5, definitely abnormal, but again, I as mentioned that it depends which gestational week we are negotiating. That is important. This nuchal translucency, although patient is not lying on the back, but this is so apparent, so thick. Calculation is important for risk calculation. Again, you see here we can see all the landmarks, and even nasal bone is not well visualized, and we can see nuchal translucency, again, markedly increased. This might be that cystic hygroma, and there's so many abnormalities which could be due to this increased nuchal translucency. It increases that what I have been mentioning with gestational age, and increased nuchal 95th percentile for the given CRL. That is important. What are the risks? 3 mm, 4 times the risk, 4 mm, more than 4 mm, 18 times. When the higher the nuclear translucency, the higher the risk, and more are the chances of that fetus having abnormalities. A lot of problems in Euploides. If you do the karyotyping, it is normal. Even then, you can't have sigh of relief. You have to see it can have congenital heart defects, skeletal dysplasias, connective tissue disorders, or sometime it can be normal also. So we have to go for other markers and then advise fetal echo and detailed anomaly scan, 18 to 22 week scan. So chromosomally normal fetus, increased nuclear thickness, as I mentioned, other problems can be there. Nasal bone, the other thing Dr. Down said, as I mentioned earlier, that these are the clues which point out towards the major abnormalities. And nasal bone, again, roughly we say 11 to 14 weeks, but the rule is the same. CRL 4584, before 45. The latest paper, they are saying that nasal bone is usually not well visualized before 12 weeks. So instead of 45 CRL, they say 48 or 50. That's the right time to comment on the nasal bone. Before that, it's difficult. Again, we still say it's a section.
It's okay, fine. I'm fine.
Membrane on the back, and here we see this double lines, two lines, one showing the skin, other showing the nasal bone. And here you see this is the palate, rectangular shaped palate, and two bones. This is the skin, first less echogenic, and second thicker and more echogenic. That is the nasal bone. Again here, this is the skin and this is the nasal bone. This is just, you can see the skin, no nasal bone. So this can be misdirecting, can be giving a false impression that there is a nasal bone. And actually, you have to see the two lines over here. Again here, this is less echogenic, thinner. No nasal bone here, just this echogenicity is the skin, very thin, not a thick. For spina bifida, the idea was floated by the Fetal Medicine Foundation in 86, that if you see banana sign or lemon sign, that can be due to an open neural tube defect. But that is in the second trimester. We didn't have anything for almost 20 years for the first trimester. For 2 decades, there were a lot of papers that spina bifida doesn't exist in the first trimester because we couldn't see that. We didn't have lemon sign, we didn't have banana sign. We couldn't diagnose. Only with very high resolution machines, we started seeing that directly the spina bifida, but that was only possible when spine was facing towards the probe. So in some papers, 1% sensitivity, some papers show 2%, some papers show 0% in first trimester. Because we didn't have any lemon or banana sign, which could give us a clue toward this abnormality. Then people started searching other signs. And we take in axial section, we take 3 sections. One is that transthalamic, then transventricular, and then transcerebellar, even in the first trimester. So here you see that this is the thalamus, this is the midbrain, doesn't reach to the occipital bone. This distance is very, very important. If you don't see this distance, there's something abnormal. And here you see this is aqueduct, thalami and aqueduct here, midbrain, and this is at a distance from the occipital bone. And here you see this is reaching to the occipital bone, and this is called sonographic crash sign, because there is loss of water in the posterior fossa, and that sign gave us a very, very important marker for spina bifida. After getting this sign, the paper showed 70% diagnosis of spina bifida in the first trimester, 80%. So the whole scenario changed when we got these signs in the first trimester. You can see this is reaching to that, the occipital bone, no distance between that, and that is called the sonographic crash sign. The distance between the wall and the car, and here this bumping with the wall, no distance between that, and that is called the crash sign. The butterfly sign, when we take a transventricular section, we see the choroid plexus in the shape of a butterfly in the both ventricles. There's a bit of fluid around that, and you see this is a classical butterfly sign, and this is normal. And when again there is open spina bifida, that butterfly configuration is lost, fluid leak is there because there is negative pressure in that neural tube, and that leads to lack of butterfly sign. That was the second transaxial sign, which is giving a clue to that open spina bifida. You see this is normal and this is abnormal. It's very clear. This is normal butterfly and this is abnormal. People started working on that the ratio of total area of choroid plexus to head area and ratio of mean length of choroid plexus to OFT, still different schools, they have thrown different charts, still is work in progress. You people can start making your own charts, and that's going to be again a very, very important information. In second trimester, we do have that less than 10, the ventricular size less than 10. First trimester, we don't have a nomogram. We don't have any points that value. So how can we decide about hydrocephaly in the first trimester? So that is when you don't see that proper butterfly sign, you see fluid around the choroid plexus, and on visual impression we can decide. And here you see there's no cleavage, and in first trimester that gives a monoventricle and no butterfly sign, and no butterfly sign, monoventricle. This is holoprosencephaly. Ventriculomegaly in second trimester, we know that mild, moderate, and marked. We have values for that. I'm just going to stop in 1 minute. And obliterated core bar the transcerebellar section. If this bar is fluid anterior and posterior to this bar in the first trimester, that again normal, and when it's lost, there is no fluid anterior and posterior, and that the choroid bar sign gives us a clue that there's going to the third sign. And when there's a cystic space in the posterior fossa, can be a Blake's pouch cyst or Dandy Walker. So these signs in the first trimester can definitely give us clues about the major abnormalities which were not seen in the past, and now by these signs we have started seeing and predicting the fetal outcome, and we can decide about the next scan and the anomaly scan and fetal MRI, and so many other techniques can be advised. Thank you very much. कंप्यूटर अपना